This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming out on this beautiful summer day. Once in a while, Hashem puts the air conditioning on the whole world. And it's just so appreciated. So we thank Hashem for giving us a beautiful day, and I thank you for coming to share this beautiful day with me. I want to thank the amazing staff of Yeshiva Beth Yehuda and Partners Detroit for setting up this beautiful lunch learn, and I want to thank the amazing folk over at Torah Anytime and Jewish Anytime. Okay, Jewish Anytime is an accompanying website where their classes are all more English-centric. And if you don't have as much background and you don't want a speech that's going to be half in Yiddish or Hebrew or English, and you want a speech that speaks to any Jewish citizen of the world, go to Jewish Anytime, and you'll find a lot of material there that it's made for the broader Jewish audience, even those who don't have a very strong Talmudic background. Okay, so I want to thank those people, though, because they're amazing, and they're putting out incredible Jewish content as well. And again, they're an app, they're a website, jewishanytime.com, torahanytime.com. Okay. And of course on Tisha Bav, by the way, which is going to be this Sunday, there is an enormous amount of content on aish.com, on chabad.org, on jewishanytime.com, on torahanytime.com. Please make sure to use the time of Tisha Bav appropriately by finding the content that's available, and may it be meaningful. This is our Tisha Bav special, and I say special, my hope is that we don't make it to Tisha Bav. I hope that Mashiach comes, and by Tisha Bav we'll be dancing in the courtyards of the Holy Temple, and I'm not kidding, I really hope that happens. We still have time, there's still opportunity. There's a verse in the Book of Lamentations. The Book of Lamentations is the book that we read on the night of Tisha Bav. It's called Eicha. It was written by Jeremiah the prophet. Jeremiah is from the most tragic figures in Jewish scripture. Tragic because he spends his entire life begging the Jewish people to get their act together. If you open up the book of Jeremiah, right? So he wrote the book of Jeremiah. He also wrote the book of Lamentations. If you open up the book of Jeremiah, it's page after page where he's telling the Jewish people, I see the future. Terrible things are coming. Get your act together. You guys are acting in an abhorrent way, and God will not allow you to dwell on His special holy land with the ways that you're acting. He even tells them from which direction. Mitzafon tipotach hara'ah. From the north, they're going to come up marching in. He sees where the enemies are going to come from. He sees it all, and he's just begging the Jewish people to get it right. And unfortunately they don't, and the temple is destroyed. And then he has to write the book of Lamentations, describing the destruction, the devastation, the absolute genocide of our people. And he's got to describe all that in the book of Lamentations, which is written as the Jewish people are being dragged off in chains to Babylonia. In the book of Lamentations, chapter 1, verse 3, it says the following. Kol rodfei hisigua bein hamitzarim. All those who pursue her being the Jewish people, Hisiguha, they reach her, Bein Hamitzarim, between the boundaries. The Medrash Rabbah on Eicha, one of the primary commentators, explains that this refers to the time between the boundaries. The time between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, which is the fast day that we had a few weeks ago, on the 17th of Tammuz, and Tisha Bav. This is the darkest period of the calendar for the Jewish people. It's a time of mourning. It's a time where we have restrictions. We don't make marriages. We don't listen to music. We don't get haircuts. It's the time where the wall of Jerusalem had already been breached. and the horde of barbarians was making their way towards the Holy Temple, which eventually would be breached and lit on fire on the 9th of Av, which is Tisha Bav. And the Medrash Rabbah tells us that during this time, and my aunt used to say, the people in the southern hemisphere, they got it right, because we have the 3 weeks smack in the middle of our summer vacations. Like, everyone's on vacation, but we have the 3 weeks. They got to be morning, sitting on the floor, no barbecues, no eating meat during the 9 days. He's like, the people who live in the southern hemisphere, they have their summer vacation, in the middle of what we call winter, and then it culminates with Purim or Pesach. Like, they have it right. Like, that's when they're on vacation. We're on vacation, times of restriction, times of mourning, times of pain, times of suffering. Indeed, throughout Jewish history, it's uncanny how during the 3 weeks, every year, terrible things happen. And this year is no different. There have been so many calamities in the last few weeks. For starters, close to home, right here in New York City, a deranged gunman walked into a building, 345 Park Avenue. And while he was seeking the offices of the NFL, he ended up taking the elevator to the 33rd floor, which was the offices of Blackstone, and he ended up killing a number of people, including a woman, Wesley LePartner, a 43-year-old Jewish woman, wife, mother of 2 children, deeply involved in and on the boards of Jewish charities, Jewish educational institutions, who put her entire volunteer life into strengthening Jewish identity and awareness and pride in America, where it's under serious assault. To quote her friend Caroline Tell, who wrote about it, and I quote, "Wesley used her voice to champion Jewish causes, advocate for Israel, and to show up fully and passionately for her family and friends. She carried the weight of it all on her 5'1" frame and made it look not just possible, but purposeful." She was killed. On top of that, in Israel, so many soldiers have died in these 3 weeks. When the reports come in, I force myself to look at the pictures. You look at these pictures, they're such young, just these beautiful, innocent faces. People are just starting out their lives. And they won't. They died trying to protect our brothers and our sisters. So let's just, in the 3 weeks here, on July 14th, which was the day after Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, Ulai Factor of Rishon LeZion, 52nd Battalion, 401st Armored Brigade. Sergeant Shlomo Yakir Shrem, 20 years old, of Efrat, also 52nd Battalion, 401st Armored Brigade. Staff Sergeant Shoham Menachem of Moshav Yardena, also 52nd Battalion, 401st Brigade. July 21st, Sergeant Major Vladimir Loza, 36, of Ashkelon, from the 7,020th Battalion of the 5th Brigade. Staff Sergeant Amit Cohen, 19, of Cholon, 13th Battalion, Golani Infantry Brigade. On the 26th of July, this week, 2025, Sergeant Inon Nuriel Vana, 20 years old, of Kiryat Tivon, from the Golani Reconnaissance Unit. And Captain Amir Saad, 22 years old, of Yanu Jat, from the Golani Reconnaissance Brave. Sergeant Major Bitzalel Yoshua Mosbacher, 32 years old, a father of Moshav Avnei Eitan, from the 749th Combat Engineering Battalion. These are people who died right now in these 3 weeks. Kol rodfeha hisiguha bein hamitzarim. Those who pursue her, Israel, catch up with her during these 3 weeks. On top of that, there's been an alarming rise in suicide this year among soldiers, both while on active duty and after returning from their time in Gaza. Last week, we saw a young man, Roy Wasserman, 24 years old, take his own life, unable to deal with the trauma. He had spent 300 days in Gaza. There are exploding numbers of PTSD in the Israeli population. We were just on a solidarity mission to Israel in May, and our logistics coordinator, this just beautiful, sweet young man who was with us the whole time, he spent 280 plus days inside of Gaza fighting. He was part of the Sayeret Golani, an elite unit, and he was the nicest person, but he was so full of PTSD, his hand was shaking the entire time. Neurologically, he was messed up. And this is happening all over the country. Kol rodfeha hisiguha bein hamitzarim. All those who pursue Israel catch up with her in between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha Bav, between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. And then if that wasn't enough, again, in this period of time, of course, because that's when calamities befall Israel, as the Midrash Rabbah tells us. This week, the most insane thing happened on a global scale. Canada, France, England, all come out and announce that if Israel does not make a ceasefire, they're going to recognize a Palestinian state. Now, mind you, Israel's tried to make a ceasefire. We've offered dozens of deals. Hamas keeps saying no. We're saying, give us back the people you're torturing in your tunnels for 663 days, and we'll give you a ceasefire. But they say no. They walk away from the table every time. The U.S. government just said it straight out. It's Hamas that's just not willing to do it. And you know why they're not willing to give a ceasefire? Because the world's going to say to Israel, if you don't give them a ceasefire, we're going to declare a Palestinian state. We're going to award murderers who came in on a holy holiday and murdered thousands and maimed and tortured. No one's telling Hamas, you have a date where you have to do anything. They're telling Israel, if you don't make a ceasefire, what does that mean, make a ceasefire? We're trying. We've tried 5, 10 times. The whole world is piling on Israel right now. Kol rodfeha hisiguha bein hamitzarim. It's between this time, the witching hour of our calendar, between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha Bav, when they all pile in on us. Another example. The New York Times published a front page article with a massive picture of this child in Gaza that looked like a skeleton. And it wrote this whole article about how Israel is starving the children there. Okay? And that caused the world to turn. I want you to know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, 70% of the United States of America, of Americans, were on Israel's side in this war. To understand that, despite all the facts that the media, which was so unfortunately biased against Israel, as it's been, and it's been proven, there have been study after study to show this, even though the media made it sound like everyone was against Israel, 70% of America was actually pro the Israel side. I don't know if you know this, but right now that number has dropped to about 32%, the lowest it's been since the beginning of this war, because people see these pictures in the New York Times of starving babies. Who's not going to feel bad for a skeletal baby? And the Israelis are for sure starving them. Now, of course, the article never mentions anywhere the fact that there's hundreds of trucks worth of aid right inside of Gaza. But Hamas won't let anybody touch it. Hamas kills people for trying to get aid that Israel's giving. They don't mention that. But forget that. It was that image. Images are so powerful. Remember the image of that girl running in Vietnam or Cambodia? Remember that famous image? That changed a generation. Images matter. The image of the Buddhist priest who lit himself on fire. Images matter. The image of the man standing in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square. Images matter. So the New York Times prints this image and writes this whole article about how Israel is starving the children in Gaza. And then yesterday, they issue the retraction because they were forced to. And they write that actually that child had musculoskeletal diseases, and therefore he always looked like this from the time he was born. They actually showed the medical records of this child to prove it. But you know what? Listen to this. This is amazing, by the way. This is just so amazing how the New York Times is so absolutely crumb, so absolutely disgusting. They issued their retraction on what's called the New York Times PR channel, which almost nobody, it has like 88.6 thousand followers, 89,000 followers. It's called the New York Times PR channel, not a TV. It's on on Twitter and all the social media. But the original piece they had with that big propaganda of the starving child was posted on their main channel, which has 55 million followers. So you put out this libelous picture against Israel for 55 million followers, and you do your retraction on your PR page, which has 89,000 followers. It's staggering. Kol rodfeha hisiguha bein hamitzarim. We shouldn't have expected much less. This is the time of the year where everyone just piles in on the Jewish people. Her pursuers reach her between the borders, between the 17th day of Tammuz, which starts our period of mourning, and Tisha Bav, which is where it culminates. The pain is palpable. The pain is real. But I want you to know something. If you're feeling the pain, that's a very good sign, because it means that you're feeling the peoplehood. If you're feeling the pain, you're feeling the peoplehood. This is your pain. This is your story. This is our story. This is our people. This is our brothers and sisters. So at least we're feeling the pain. I once sat on a plane, and I was sitting next to a nice Christian gentleman. We got into a whole long conversation. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. And he started asking me about Israel. We had a very cordial conversation. And finally I said to him, I'll tell you the truth. You're a devout Christian, right? And he's like, yeah, I try to be. I'm like, here's what I don't understand. There are Muslim extremists slaughtering Christians all over the globe. In Egypt, the Coptic Christians are slowly being killed out. In Iraq, right? The Chaldeans over here, the Chaldean community over here, right? They're Iraqi Christians. They're Iraqi Christians. Their people are being killed out. In Syria, they're killing out all the Christians that have been there for thousands of years. In Lebanon, Lebanon used to be 50% Christian, 50% Muslim. Today, it's like 89%, whatever. They're murdering the Christians everywhere. In Nigeria, in Kenya, wherever you go in the world. Actually, if you Google this, when you get home, what are the 20 most active terrorist groups in the world right now? And guess what? 20 out of 20 of them are Islamic groups. And they're not all killing Jews because they're not all in the Middle East. I said, how do you not bleed? How are you not furious with what's going on? You're a Christian. These are co-believers. And you all believe in the same God. You all believe in JC. These are your people. Why are you not bleeding? And he said, it's just not like that. I'm like, what do you mean it's just not like that? He said to me, with the Jews, if a Jew anywhere is hurt in the world, every Jew in the world feels that pain. With Christians, it's just not like that. I don't really feel like those are my people. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it makes sense, because if this is not true, by the way, you're like, no, I can't believe that. If it was true, where in the world are the 1+ billion Christians defending all the Christians that are being slaughtered all over the world? Elamai, what this means is, Elamai, what does this mean then? It must mean that it's actually what this guy was telling me is true. Like, listen, I don't feel the kinship. It's like a different group. They're like a different Christian, a different group, they don't feel it. We feel it. Baruch Hashem, thank God, we feel the pain. Thank God when we hear of one Roy Wasserman, 24 years old, who committed suicide last week because of he just couldn't handle the mental health challenges of what he had been through for 300 days fighting in Gaza. We feel, we bleed. Baruch Hashem. That means we're still a people. And let's try to understand how we get out of this. We are now in exile as of Sunday for 1,955 years. That is an awful long time. In the history of humanity, no one is still trying to get back from an exile that's 1,955 years old. There were 2 temples that were destroyed. The first exile was relatively brief. It was 70 years. And while I'm sure that was deeply painful, like I said, relatively brief. We are now in exile for 1,955 years. This one must be for something horrible. So let's look at the Talmud. The Gemara, Tractate Yoma, page 9b. Gemara Yuma, Tes Amud Beis. Mikdash Rishon, Mipnei Ma Charav. Why was the first temple destroyed? And the first temple and the second temple were both destroyed on Tisha Bav. Tisha Bav, if the 3 weeks are the witching hour of the Jewish people, Tisha Bav is the worst of the worst. The Jewish people cried all night long when the spies came back and slandered the land of Israel. And they cried all night long, saying, if only we can go back to die in Egypt, or die in this desert. And God's like, you want to cry? This will be your night. This will be your day of crying. And Tisha B'Av has been, if you look back at history, Tisha B'Av, in 1492, the Jews were expelled from Spain on Tisha B'Av. Go look it up. You can't make this stuff up. World War I broke out on Tisha B'Av. You can't make this stuff up. And of course, World War I led directly into World War II. So the Talmud asks, why did they go into the first exile? And it says, Mipnei Shlosha Dvarim Shahayu Bo. There were 3 things they were doing wrong. Avodah Zarah, they were serving idols. Vigilur Arayos, committing adultery. Ushvichas Damim, and murder. And then it actually gives verses that show you that all 3 of these things were happening and were rampant during the time leading up to the first temple's destruction. Remember Jeremiah? We were talking about him before. He is calling them out for these crimes throughout his entire book. Then, the Gemara continues. Aval, Mikdash Sheni Shahayu Oskim B'Torah, Uva Mitzvos, Uva Gemilas Chasadim, the second temple. They were learning Torah. They were doing mitzvos. They were shaking their lulavs. They were sitting in their sukkahs. Uva Gemilas Chasadim, they're doing acts of kindness. They had meal trains when people had a baby to make sure that they're taken care of. The community had Hebrew free loans. And they had support for the seniors. And they had special programs to care for children who were born and their mothers needed extra help. Why was it destroyed? Because it had baseless hatred. To teach you to teach you that sinas chinam, baseless hatred, is just as equal as the 3 cardinal sins: avodah zarah, idol worship, gilur arayos, committing adultery, ushvichas damim, and murder. Whoa! How in the world is baseless hatred equal to those 3 cardinal sins? So a couple questions here. Number 1, what is sinas chinam? What does it mean to hate somebody for nothing? I may hate people, but it's usually not for nothing. I've got a reason. Ask me. I'll tell you. If you go around the streets over here, you'll see a lot of signs that say, in this home there's no hate. You ever see those signs? Generally put up on the lawns of people who are the most hateful people out there. If you have to put a sign on your front yard that says, in this home there's no hate, I don't know, something tells me you're not a great friend of anybody on the other side of you. And we know this because we see videos whenever anything terrible happens. You see the side of no hate putting out videos saying they deserved it, they got what they deserved. You know, I wish more people, you know, these girls died in this flood in Texas, these Christian girls. And people are like, yay, look at them, a bunch of white girls, they deserved it. Now in Cincinnati this past week, a woman and man were like pummeled by a crowd, like of people, you know, of African-American people. They were just like attacked and beaten to a pulp. And a city councilman from Cincinnati, a black woman, wrote, like, she was begging for that. She got what she deserved, and I'm happy for it. What do you? But in this home, there's no hate. But in this home, there's no hate. Anyway, okay, but that's not my topic over here. What does it mean to hate for no reason? Number 2, how can you say that hate is worse than 3 cardinal sins? Murder, idolatry, adultery? Like, how does it compute? The Torah says one time, it says you shall love v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You shall love your neighbor like yourself. It says one time, lo sisna es achicha b'levecha. Don't hate your brother in your heart. So one time it tells you to love him, and one time it tells you not to hate him. The prohibitions against murder and idolatry and adultery are repeated dozens of times in the Torah, especially the one against idolatry. So how do you tell me that they're equal? Next, there's a Mishnah in Tractate Tainus that says what happened to our forefathers on the terrible days of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha Bav. Remember, those are the bookmarks of this period where all the pursuers of the Jewish people come for us. It says, Chamisha Dvarim Erus Abosenu B'Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. 5 things happened to our forefathers on the 17th of Tammuz, V'Chamisha B'Tisha Bav. And 5 things happened on Tisha Bav. B'Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, on the 17th of Tammuz, Nishtabru HaLuchos, the first set of tablets were broken. Moses comes down from the mountain, sees the Jewish people serving the golden calf, and he smashes the first set of tablets. Ubatal HaTamid, and the continual offering that was brought every day, which provided tremendous protection and merit for the Jewish people, was stopped. V'huvka ha'ir, and the city of Jerusalem was breached. V'sarv apostamos as a Torah, and a man named Apostamos burned a Torah scroll. It was the first time something like that had ever happened. V'ha'mid selam b'heichal, and a idol was erected in the temple courtyard itself. That's the 5 things that happened on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. B'Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of Av, Nigzar al Avosenu shelo yikansu la'aretz. It was decreed on our forefathers that they won't go into the land. That's, remember, after the story with the spies. And they said all night long, if only we could die in the desert rather than go into this horrible place that God wants to bring us to where we're all going to die. And God's like, all right, you're not going to go into the land. You're going to die in the desert. Your children will go in and see the amazing land I'm about to give them. B'char habayis barishono ubashniya. The first temple was destroyed. The second temple was destroyed. V'nilka the Beitar, the city of Beitar, which was a refuge and had a massive population, was destroyed. V'nechrasha ha'ir, and the city of Jerusalem was plowed over like a field in degradation. And therefore the Mishnah says, Misha nichnas Av mima'atim b'simcha. When the month of Av comes, we lower our joy. That's why we're not serving filet mignon today. Okay. Now let me ask you a question. Do you notice that everything is written in the passive? It doesn't say that on the 17th of Tammuz the Jewish people worshiped the golden calf. It says on the 17th of Tammuz the tablets were broken. On the 9th of Av, the Jews were decreed that they won't enter the land. It doesn't say that the Jews cried all night long and railed against God and complained and slandered the land of Israel. It doesn't say that. It says on the 9th of Av, we were decreed that we can't go into the land. Everything's written in the passive. Why? Why is the Mishnah, so to speak, like not calling us out for what our hand in those things were?
What am I doing?
Hold on a second. Okay. And the people who came back, the spies who came back, who, by the way, this is the inaugural Tisha Bav, they said horrible things. They essentially said that the people who live in Israel are so strong that even God can't beat them, which is ludicrous. They just watched God take the Egyptian civilization, the most powerful civilization of the time, and bend and push it and play soccer with it and kick it. Blood, frogs, lice, pestilence. Just like boom, boom, boom. And suddenly they come back and they say that even God's not strong enough to take this land. And if we go in there, we're all going to be wiped out. It's going to be a genocide. The Talmud tells us in Tractate Sota 35a, V'hanashim asher alu imo amru lo nuchal. The spies who went up, they said, we cannot. Davar gadol dibru meraglim. The meraglim, the spies, said a very, very big thing, Ba'oso Shah, in that moment. When they said, ki chazak hu mimenu, they said they're too strong from us. The word mimenu can be read from us or from mimenu, from him. Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa says, don't read it that they're stronger than us. Read it they're stronger than him. That even God can't beat these giants and these people in Israel. What a horrific thing to say about God after you've witnessed God's incredible miracles and you've lived on God's miracles. You're living off of God's miraculous manna. You're eating. You're drinking water from the miraculous well of Miriam. You're being surrounded by the clouds of glory. You watch the seas split, and yet you're going to say something so horrific that God can't take them out? What is even going on? And this is the root of all the Tisha Bavs. What was going on over here? So now we got to understand the spies a little bit better. The Talmud also says there in Sota that when they went out, they had intention to slander. What would that mean? Why would they have intention to slander? Okay. When they came back and they gave this terrible report, and now I'm reading directly from the Chumash, from the book of Numbers, from the book of Bamidbar, chapter 13. And the men who came back said, we cannot ascend to the land because they are stronger than us or stronger than him even. And they produced slander of the land that they had just gone to tour to the Jewish people, saying, the land that we went through to go tour it is a land that eats up its inhabitants. And everybody we saw there was super, super strong, which, by the way, just right away, immediately, is a contradiction. If it's a land that can produce super big, gigantic giants, clearly it's a land that's able to produce very robust and healthy people. But you just said it's a land that eats its inhabitants. But when you are ideologically driven, there's no comprehension of the internal discrepancies in your narrative. V'sham ra'inu es hanephilim b'nei Anak. We saw the Nephilim, the children of the giants, min hanephilim, from the Nephilim. V'nehi be'einenu kachagavim, and we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes. V'chein hayinu be'eineihem, and so we were in their eyes. Okay. There's an interesting medrash that says, and we were like grasshoppers in our eyes. This refers to the first temple. And so we were in their eyes. This refers to the second temple. What does this mean? And how do we even understand what was going on over there, that the spies would come back and give such a terrible report? Today we have a phenomenon where we have a tremendous amount of pet lovers. Unfortunately, in America, we don't have enough child lovers. I'm sure you're well aware, America is on the path to extinction. In order for you to have a society that just perpetuates itself, you need to have, the average woman has to give birth to between 2.1 and 2.2 babies. Okay? On average. In America right now, we are well below the 2 mark, which means we're essentially giving up as a nation. Like, we're just not having children. But you know what we have a lot of? A lot of pets. A lot of pets. And we spend billions and billions and billions and billions and billions on our pets. I'm sure you've all seen a car with the bumper sticker that says, "My child has paws." I'll tell you, that bumper sticker gives me pause. There is a strange phenomenon that happens in society where there's almost more protection for animals than there is for humans. I don't know if you are aware, but this also happened in Germany. Nazi Germany had very, very robust animal protection laws. Unfortunately, it didn't extend to humans. The reality is that when humans compare themselves to animals, it's usually not in the context of bringing the humans up. Sorry, the animals up. It's in the context of bringing the humans down. There is currently an airline, by the way. It's called Paws Air. All private jets. And it's for dogs. If you want to send a handler along with it, you could. But it's private jets for dogs to be shuttled around the country in absolute luxury. Right? So if you're going to vacation to your place in Palm Beach or Sunny Isles or whatever it is, and you don't want to have to bring your dog in a little, one of those little carriers on the airplane for all the emotional support pets or whatever it is. So you just get a private jet. What else would you do, right? Of course. And we were like grasshoppers in our eyes. That's the first temple. No one ever faults an animal for being an animal. It's just doing what it does. No one ever faults the wolf pack for tracking that young baby moose bull that seems to be limping, and the family of gray wolves will track it for miles and then attack and separate it from the pack and eventually take down and eat it alive. No one's saying, "Oh, bad, bad, bad gray wolf." We're saying, no, gray, gray wolf. A Kodiak bear, when preparing for the winter, can grab out of the waters 150 salmon a day, slap it into its mouth, and throw away the rest. Literally, you got 150 a day. No one says, "You killer, what's wrong with you?" He's like, "I got to store up for the winter. I'm going to hibernate." Saying, wait, don't hibernate. Look at the bison. The bison struggles all winter long. Go to Yellowstone National Park. Watch the bison in the winter. They have to get to their grass that they graze on, and it's all under the snow. So they're sitting there with their massive heads, moving the snow away and then getting to the grass. They don't eat other animals. They just do it the hard way. No one says to the bear, "What's wrong with you, Kodiak bear? Why don't you just go vegan like the bison and fight for the food on the bottom of the snow? You're sitting here eating 150 salmon a day. Those salmon are mommies and daddies." That's what bears do. There's a primate called a bonobo. And this primate is so non-discriminate, it has no sense of loyalty to its mate. It will interact with anyone and everyone, even its own children. No one says, "Hey, that's not appropriate." It's a bonobo. When people say we're like grasshoppers, what they're saying is we're just human animals, and we just can't hold ourselves back. So we do what we do. Yeah, murder, survival of the species. Yeah, adultery, idolatry. We have all kinds of rationalizations. When you think you're an animal, you get to act like an animal and not feel guilty about it. We're just human animals. That's the first temple. And that's how you get into these terrible, terrible sins. Why grasshoppers specifically? It's just strange. Why grasshoppers? How do grasshoppers come? They come in swarms and they go in swarms. Not a single individual grasshopper ever thinks. Right? They're like an organism. It's fascinating to read about grasshoppers, by the way. They literally, they act as like one sort of brain hive, and they just, they pick up, they go, they settle down in a new place, and they're there for whatever time it is. and then they start like vibrating. It's actually, you read up on it, it's wild. And they just, and they all pick up and they all go. Like, I'm just one of the pack. Don't look at me and say, what are you doing? I'm a grasshopper. I don't think. I just go with the pack. Whatever sign they're holding today. Globalize the intifada. Globalize the intifada. What does globalize the intifada mean? It means kill people indiscriminately all around the world to produce your terroristic goals. That's what it means. And you have people who are professors in college shouting, globalize the intifada. Like, what are you, crazy? But they were just holding a placard and they were marching and just shouting, I'm just a grasshopper, man. Like, hey, you've seen all the videos where they say to them, what you say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And they say, what river, what sea? And people have no idea. It's like, hey man, stop asking me all these questions. I'm a grasshopper. Why am I supposed to know the answers to these questions? Why am I supposed to know the answers? I don't think. I just march like a grasshopper. So don't blame me if I'm advocating for murdering innocent people. Don't blame me if I'm advocating for the breakdown of family values and morality and purity. If I'm standing outside of some courthouse with signs promoting the most sick ideologies of not protecting women and exposing women, horrible things. Don't blame me. Don't ask me any questions, please. I'm just a grasshopper. That's how you get to idolatry, adultery, and murder. But then there's the other one. Then there's the, and so we were in their eyes. That's the second temple. What does that mean? And by the way, before I get to that, that's why in the Mishnah, everything is said in the passive. Everything happened to us. The tablets were destroyed. You're blaming us that we were like serving a golden calf. Hey man, I'm a grasshopper. I don't carry blame. Like the gray wolf, like the bonobo, like the Kodiak bear. Don't look at me. Things happen to me. I'm not involved. Terrible things keep happening to me and I don't know why, but I'm just a grasshopper. Please don't ask me any questions. But what about the second temple? Why is that worse? So here's what happens. When you keep messing up, and you keep doing things that are like not good, somewhere deep inside, your soul starts to rot. And as much as they tell you, no, don't worry about it, it's okay, it's perfectly normal to do these things, these depraved things, or that depraved thing, and you have psychologists telling you that's okay, it's healthy, it's normal, you don't feel good inside. You feel a little bit soulless. And then you start to not like yourself so much. Because you were created with an image of God, and you're supposed to be godly. So when you're not being godly, there's a deep disconnect inside of you, and that starts to rot away at you, and you feel really, really uncomfortable. It's like you're putting the wrong kind of gasoline in your engine. You're putting diesel gas into your regular car, and things start gunking up, and it starts breaking down. You try to turn on your engine, and you don't feel good. You're not operating at capacity or anywhere near it. So then what happens, you start to feel bad about yourself. That's one thing, but then it gets worse. I start feeling bad about myself, so I feel bad about myself, but then I start to project that onto others. And I think the same way I see myself, other people must see that in me too. And other people probably don't like me too. Because I can't love myself, I can't imagine that anybody else loves me. And everyone else suddenly becomes a person who hates me, because it's a reflection of my own hate, of my own self. I start projecting it on others, and so we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. I start assuming that you all hate me, because why would a person love me? I'm irredeemable. I'm not lovable. So I start to assume everybody hates me. And then when everybody hates me, what do I do back to them? I hate them back. My neighbor who didn't say good morning to me this morning because they were on a phone call with their nephew who's going through a medical crisis, but I assume, because I hate myself, there you go, see my neighbor? They don't like me anymore. They hate everybody. And then I start telling people terrible things about the neighbor, because now we're at war. I start creating demons in everybody around me, and then I hate those demons. Where it really is a reflection of my own discomfort with myself. And that creates an entire breakdown of society. It's actually worse than the murder and the idolatry and the adultery, because you have total societal breakdown when everybody sees everybody else as a person who hates me. It's for nothing. It's sinas chinam. It's baseless hatred. It's not true. They don't hate you. That kid in your class, yeah, she may not talk to you all the time, but maybe she's uncomfortable because you're kind of really cool and really smart. She's uncomfortable around you. She doesn't hate you. She wishes she could be your friend. She doesn't know how to say it, so she kind of stays away from you, so you think she hates you, so now you hate her, and you talk bad about her to others. And then you start making groups in the class. Before you know it, we've got a whole class that's split into 4 different groups. People are switching sides all the time. Anxiety, depression. We're fighting for what? For phantom hatred. And the reason why it's worse than just idolatry, adultery, and murder is that normally when you have a society that's together, there's a concept of ish l're'ehu yomar chazak. People say to one another, like, let me strengthen you, let me support you, let me be there for you. But the minute everyone's out to get me, I don't have any way to get, there's no one here to help me out. We're all battling it alone. No one understands me. Each one of us is terminally unique. The difficulties we're going through are terminally unique. No one understands me, and I'm all alone here, and I just got to fight against all those people out there who are trying to take away my piece of the pie. How do we get back from this? How do we get back from this? Step number 1. Start to recognize that you're not a grasshopper. Start to recognize your own godly self. Start to recognize that you are holding inside of you, you're a piece of God. You are God's child who He loves more than anything. Despite all your flaws, and despite all your weaknesses, and despite the mistakes that you've made repeatedly, He still loves you. Because He's your parent. Now, what are some tips for me to start seeing that? How do I recognize that I'm not a bad person, I'm just a good person that got caught up in some foolishness? How do I recognize that I'm not a grasshopper, but rather a piece of the divine? Ironically, the easiest way to do that, because we are by nature so self-critical, start to see it in other people. Other people out there are not perfect either. With the exception of you guys, everyone else out there has got tons of flaws. The more I start saying things to people, seeing the good in them, speaking about the good in them, thinking about the good in them, when my natural instinct says, oh yeah, you see that person? No, say, wait. You know what? That guy's an amazing father. Find the good. Find what we call the nekuda tova, the good detail that you can see and hyper-focus on it. And the more you start to see the good in others, the more you start to recognize, if they're all not flawed, maybe I'm not that flawed. And then you start to see yourself with compassion, which is the way that God sees you. God sees you with compassion. You don't understand, I met with somebody this week who's going through such pain. They've made a lot of really, really, really bad life decisions, but they're going through such pain. And when you start to see what they're going through and the pain that they're going through, you're like, I'm not going to get angry at this person. I'm not going to judge this person. I don't want anything bad for him. I just want him to get out of this place that he's in. That's how God sees us. God loves us. The minute we start seeing that in other people, it starts to filter in, I'm not I'm not bad. I'm not irredeemable. I'm not unlovable. I'm actually very lovable. I've just been through a whole lot. And I need help. And I want to reach out to God and say, hey God, can you please help me? And God's like, there. So the first step is to recognize that you're not a grasshopper. And the way you're going to do that is by reversing the exercise. The exercise was, I thought I was a grasshopper, then I think you all think I'm a grasshopper. And if you all think you're a grasshopper, you're all my enemy, and therefore I hate you. So now we got to reverse the period. We start off with you. You guys are all amazing. You guys are all great. I change my language. I find a way to talk good about everybody because I realize I'm just talking about everybody evil it destroys my entire society. So I start finding the good in you and in you and you, and I come back and I tell my wife, it was amazing on Shul. This guy said this, and this guy was amazing, and the rabbi was so good, he spoke so beautifully, and I just start living that way, and then I start seeing the good in all of you, and then it starts to project back onto me, and I see that there's a little bit of me in that good too. And then once I'm no longer a grasshopper, and the whole world doesn't think I'm a grasshopper, I can love them, they can love me, and we can all repair this 1955-year broken exile. I want to conclude with two thoughts. We started off describing the verse in Lamentations, Kol rodfeha hisiguha bein hamitzarim. All her pursuers overtook her between the boundaries, between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av, this really, really difficult time for the Jewish people. But I also heard an amazing idea. I forgot who it was. One of the Hasidic rabbis used to say, Kol rodfeha hisigua bein hamitzarim. The word rodfeh just means those who pursue her. And we generally mean it's referring to the Jewish people. Now we think of it, they're pursuing us to get us, but it also could mean, all those who pursue the Jewish people. I want to love the Jewish people. I want to be closer to God. I want to be closer to the Jewish people. I'm running after it. This is also a time of incredible spiritual power. Yes, it's a time where they're all hating on us, but commensurate with their great hate and their great darkness comes this incredible light. That if you, in this period of time of the year, in these 3 weeks, in these last few days of the 3 weeks, if this Tisha Bav, you say, I'm a rodfeha, I'm a pursuer of the Jewish people. I want their geula, I want their redemption, I want their goodness to be revealed. I want to see their goodness. I want to be able to be a part of the greatness of the Jewish people. If you pursue it during these 3 weeks, you will reach it, Bein HaMitzarim, in this difficult period of time. And one last message. When Moses is giving his final message to the Jewish people at the end of Deuteronomy, the whole book of Deuteronomy is Moses' last messages, but this is the final one. There's a book, the Parsha V'zos HaBracha. This is the blessing that he blesses the Jewish people with. And he says the following, chapter 33, verse 29. Chapter 33, verse 28. Vayishkon Yisrael betach badad ein Yaakov. Thus Israel shall dwell secure, solitary, el eretz dagan v'sirosh, and in the land of grain and wine, af shamav yarfu tal, even his heavens shall drip with dew. Moses describes the pinnacle of the Jewish people's salvation as the Jewish people living betach, with incredible security, and badad, which means alone, solitary. And the Talmud says, when will the Jewish people have their success? When they're badad, when they're solitary, when they're alone. As long as we're trying to appease, as long as we're trying to be like, as long as we're trying to copy, as long as we're trying to imitate and blend in with all the nations around us, they reject us. When do we have the greatest security? When we're alone. Maybe we weren't so good at doing it ourselves. So God said, all right, I'll let the world do it for you. The world's pushing us out. And I say, okay, this will help us get back to where we need to be. Betach, secure, and badad, alone. May we stop focusing on the world around us, start focusing on the world inside of us. Start looking for the good in others, seeing it, describing it, talking about it, bringing it out until we realize that everybody around us is good people, which will then remind us that we are good people. They won't be grasshoppers. We won't be grasshoppers. They won't think you're a grasshopper. They'll think you're amazing but troubled, and you'll think they're amazing but troubled, and we'll all be able to get to where we need to go. Ish l're'ehu yomar chazak. Each man will say to his fellow friend, let me pick you up, let me strengthen you, and then we can climb out of this 1955 years of exile. May we see that happen speedily in our days. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being awesome.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.